The Equalizer movie was an instant classic action flick when it came out in 2014. Based on the 1980s television series of the same name and starring British actor Edward Woodward, it was a case of the week type show wherein Robert McCall, a former British intelligence agent, went around helping people who had nowhere else to turn. Much like the A-Team, McCall was someone the little guy could plead to for help against criminals and corrupt politicians when the legitimate law enforcement was either helpless to act or were part of the problem. Denzel Washington's casting as the race-swapped McCall had me worried when the film was announced back in late 2011. For about 0.0012 seconds. Of course it would be good. This was Denzel Washington we were talking about. Add into the equation Antoine Fuqua, and it was obvious from the start the movie would be awesome simply because Antoine Fuqua does not do bad movies. From Replacement Killers to Training Day to lesser movies such as King Arthur and Shooter, Fuqua does action with style and an eye for technique like few other directors working today. He has been my dream director for Marvel and or Star Wars for years. So as soon as it was clear The Equalizer was going to be a return to the Washington Fuqua team, I knew it would be good. Both men came back for a second outing with The Equalizer 4 years later, with a script that strayed from the Equalizer formula, and I think the movie suffered slightly for it. The Equalizer 2 was a good movie, yes, but the story was bigger and a more personal one for McCall, and I think this is what made it not nearly as good as the first movie. There was a lessening of the stakes to people outside of Robert McCall, with the exception of Miles, the kid who winds up being taken as a hostage. That was ancillary, however, because the board was already set and the players already on the road to their showdown. It was contained. The appeal of the first movie was the fact that there were others beyond McCall who would be affected by the outcome of his showdown with the Russian mafia, beyond his fellow hardware store employees. Fast forward 5 years, and Washington is once more being directed by Fuqua as Robert McCall finds himself in the role of the stranger riding into a town beset by villains. It is not unlike a Clint Eastwood movie from the 70s. Remove Denzel Washington and move the story to the American Old West, and you have the recipe for a classic Western. And that is probably why the first and third movies worked for me better than the second. It is a story archetype for which I have a fondness only exceeded by sci-fi fantasy and espionage movies. With The Equalizer, you even get a little espionage thriller thrown in with the neo-spaghetti western. Which brings me to how I felt as the credits started to roll at the end of Equalizer 3. What follows will have spoilers, but you should have figured that out after reading the title of the video. So let's actually rewind back to the beginning of The Equalizer 3, because I thought I was going to be disappointed given how the movie starts. It seems to begin more like the second movie than the first, and I was worried. Not because it would be a bad movie. No, I already established that Antoine Fuqua doesn't seem to know how to do those. No, I was afraid it simply would fail, despite how good the trailer looked, to return to the archetype of the first film, and instead resemble the second. We begin with an old Sicilian man driving through a vineyard with a young boy, heading towards a substantial villa. When they get there, dead bodies greet him, but there is a man standing guard outside, smoking with an absolutely petrified look on his face. And the bodies simply increase at an exponential rate as he walks through the house, having left the kid in the Jeep. Waiting for him, with 3 others guarding him, is an unarmed Robert McCall. And it was at that point that I was relieved. This was what I was hoping to see based on the trailer. I was also confused because the house looked like the end of an Equalizer movie, not the beginning. I began to wonder if they were going to use the tried and tested television technique of going back a few days and starting over in order to see what happened in the house before the old man arrived. Alas, that was not to be. Why? Because Fuqua and writer Richard Wenk had other ideas. What followed was unexpected and kicked off the entire rest of the story in a way I was not anticipating, tying not only the vineyard but McCall into a grander story than I would prefer for an Equalizer movie. However, unlike the second movie, Wenk managed to keep the story smaller while occasionally weaving in the larger context in which this movie takes place. And he did it without overcomplicating the story, thereby forcing Fuqua to expand the runtime into a marathon, and kept the narrative humming along with few wasted shots or dead zones in the movie that make you want to look at your watch. The Equalizer 3 is a tightly constructed movie that zips along without feeling rushed. As a matter of fact, I was shocked to see how early it was when I left the theater. In the process of going through the beginning, McCall winds up hurt. He is found by an Italian police officer who takes him to a doctor in the small town of Altamonte, Italy. The doctor patches him up and he remains in the town to heal. As he does, he gets to know some of the people and to appreciate the town as a nice, peaceful place. Which of course means it won't stay that way. And it being Italy, there really are only two options for bad guys: the mafia or terrorists. And Hollywood has an aversion to doing movies that might touch negatively on the subject of unchecked immigration into Europe. So the mafia it is. Now, none of that is anything you might not guess or see from watching the trailer, except for my description of the very beginning. And none of it does the movie justice. The setting is absolutely gorgeous, being on the Amalfi coast of Italy. Fuqua actually filmed in Amalfi, as well as in Naples and Rome, making the setting far more compelling than anything we are getting from green screen volume crapfests studios like Disney and Warner Brothers are excreting these days. The cinematography of this movie is simply breathtaking and pops off the screen to make you feel as if you actually are on the Mediterranean seacoast of Italy. You actually are walking around thousand-year-old towns. You actually are in Naples. The acting being done in that beautiful scenery is worthy of it. Most of the actors in the movie are largely unknown to American audiences, being that they are largely local Italian actors. Of the American actors, Denzel Washington is once again putting in an excellent performance as the stoic and fastidious Robert McCall. He has taken the character and made it his own, simply slipping into the role as if he never stopped being McCall after the last movie. Despite being 68, Washington handles the action scenes with an economy belying that age. Co-starring with him once again after being his supporting cast when she was a child in Man on Fire is Dakota Fanning. Fanning has managed one of the hardest tasks in Hollywood, not getting eaten by the cesspool that is Tinseltown as a child actor. She plays a CIA analyst who gets a tip from a call that leads her down a rabbit hole. Halfway through the film, I was pretty sure I knew what the reveal about her would be, and I was glad to find out I was right. She was excellent opposite Washington, and her role was played with the right mix of capable professional and inexperienced rookie that her character was. She also played well off the other American agent and the Italian authorities. I would not mind seeing her back in that role in the future. The Italian cast was made up of competent actors who made the movie feel authentically Italian. Everyone from Remo Girone, who played the doctor, to Eugenio Mastandrea, who played the Cabanieri, who found McCall when he was hurt, to Andrea Scarduzio, who played the head of the Camorra Mafia family, were good in their roles. It was an ensemble that held up Washington and Fanning as they played their Italian drama out in surroundings only the Mediterranean seems to be able to provide. The Equalizer franchise is one of tight action movies done old school, meaning they cost very little when compared to most of Hollywood's offerings lately. At $70 million, The Equalizer 3 only needs to make about $200 to $250 million at the box office to break even. After one weekend, it is at a little under $69 million worldwide at time of recording. Given it has yet to open to wide release in many countries, it will likely follow its predecessors and easily make back its money and then some. The Equalizer 3 is an excellent, nicely paced, enthralling movie that delights the eyes while telling the latest adventure of the tortured soul known as Robert McCall. And it might be the best of the series. I would need a separation in time from seeing it to judge if it is better than the first Equalizer. But Fuqua and Washington have recaptured the feel of the first movie without making it feel formulaic. And in today's Hollywood, that is enough to make it feel like a breath of fresh air amid rehashes, reboots, reimaginings, and wholesale franchise vandalism that is passed off as entertainment. I think that is all I have for this video. Until next time, tschüss.